everybody. Happy 2025. Welcome to the second year of the Most Excellent Entertainment podcast. Um, we're switching things up a little bit this year. We're just going to try to do some conversations without the mission statement of the original podcast, I guess. Um, and so for our first guest of the new year, we
Oh,
have
wow.
we have an author, um, a musician, cook, um, well-educated woman,
Football fan.
football
Football
fan,
fan. The,
indeed. Yep.
the Sugar Bowl is on as we speak.
Oh man, sorry.
It's okay.
But yeah, Beth Pellino Dudzic. Did I?
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
tried.
right.
Okay, awesome. So, how are you today?
I'm good. I did a little bit of running around, and I said, you know what? I'm not sure. I had it at 4 Central Time, and that's always,
Ooh,
I always need to make sure. Because I am an East Coast girl. So Central
sure.
Time for me is, wait, okay, I'm in Central Time. So I figured it out. I got
Yeah,
everything ready, took
right
the
on.
dog out, so I'm good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, when I first started doing this, I've actually interviewed people from other countries. Like I've had quite a few foreign guests on. And I always forget, well, in the beginning, I always forgot to specify that it was Eastern. And sometimes my very first guests were in Florida, which isn't like a huge time difference, but it ended up being like a big mess when we were trying to figure out what time they were supposed to come on. So I kind of nailed it
Ye-
down, but
Right, because in the Panhandle they are in Central Time. So
oh,
that's
maybe yeah, they might have been. Yeah, but I know that there
yeah,
was a time difference, so
yeah. The Panhandle is Central. But yes, I have talked to people over in Europe. So
sure.
they're like, "Are you okay with the 10 a.m.?" And I'm like, "Yeah, if you want me on your show, I'll be there at 10 a.m."
For sure. Yeah, I've talked to people where it was the day before, you
Oh
know.
wow.
Yeah, I talked to we had a guest in Sweden once, AJ Mather. He's a really awesome Grammy nominated Americana artist, I suppose, but he's
Mhm.
he's from India and
Wow.
lives in Sweden now.
Well,
Um
that's a switch. That's a
yeah,
switch
for sure.
right
Yeah.
there.
A really cool guy though. It was fun talking to him. So let's get into you.
Okay.
You currently have
Two
a
books.
series of books that you're working on, right? And you've got two of them out, and it's going to be is it four more coming this year, or is there going to be a couple this year and then maybe some more in the year like in
Yeah.
2026?
Because the editing process, like book three and book four are ready. Book
Okay,
five is technically ready. In the way that your editor, your publishing consultant, it's like release one every 4 to 6 months, and I'm always on the let's do it earlier.
sure.
Um, so in the beginning of 2025, I would expect book three to come out because the way I wrote the books is that at the end of every book, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger
Of
so
course.
that you're like, well, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
So then you buy book three. And, you know, it's different to say I have two books out and it is a series.
Hmm.
And they tell you once you get that third book out, it's a lot easier. I don't know why. I'm learning the publishing business as I go along, which
Right.
I've learned a lot because when you're an indie publisher, there's all these things, and marketing is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's just being on social media all the time and you don't realize you could go down a rabbit hole on social media, and so I say 2 hours, that's
Hmm.
it, and then I get back to writing
Right on.
because it really can social media can totally keep you there all day.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to talk about that a little bit because we've had some independent publishers on the show and writers and things like that. It's a really different world than it used to be. Like it's more open, obviously, because you have the internet and you can work on the book and you can actually put it out for consumption pretty quickly. But it's also you don't have the big machine behind you that you would have prior, when when you were publishing books. So how is that I mean you talked about it a little bit, but what is that like? Like fan interaction and all that stuff, is that like how important is that kind of thing with getting the word out?
That's very important. And I will say with the self-publishing, that is a whole world. There are a lot of bad people, and I came across two of them that they'll say, okay, for $15,000, we'll do this.
Yeah,
And your book just sits there.
right.
So I went on a site called the Alliance of Self Publishers, and there's a lot of them, and they rank them by green light, yellow light, red light. And
Hmm.
trust me, I dealt with two of the red light people, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So honestly, there was only like seven or eight people who were legit. And I
Okay.
interviewed everyone, and I found my publishing consultant who is wonderful, and said, okay, you need to start your own publishing company. And she got me my editor. I interviewed editors, I interviewed marketing people, I interviewed the woman who does my book covers. So it's kind of like everybody's a subcontractor,
Mhm.
but we are a team. And I'm lucky that the publishing consultant I have has worked with two of the other people. So it's very cohesive.
Right.
And my editor is fantastic. She understood the book right away. And she's the one who said to me, don't stop here,
Hmm.
keep going.
Nice.
And so that's how three and four were written, with her saying, keep going.
Right.
And then they're like, you just keep the series going until you get. So six books, I think, is the Perfection Saga ending.
Okay.
Um, but again, self-publishing, you can do this.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can take your book, upload it onto Amazon, as long as you still have to get copyright, ISBN numbers. You could do that by yourself.
Sure.
But is your book formatted the proper way? And
Right.
the answer is probably no, because
Right.
you need somebody professional. So for me, I was like, I only want to do this professional. I don't want to just upload my book
Hmm.
and have it be helter skelter. So I do have a team, and I said to them, guess what? We're doing six books together. And it's been great from that, but I found the right people.
Yeah.
And that is the key in the whole thing that I would tell people. And the other thing, very expensive.
Right.
It's
Sure.
very expensive.
Sure. So your books have like a rock and roll uh theme running through them. The main
Absolutely.
character is pursuing her dream of being a vocalist. Um
Exactly. With her cousin. And
yeah,
I always tell people this. This story has been in my head for like 20 plus years.
yeah,
Along with, I do have three other stories that want to jump out, and they do occasionally, but now that I'm so tied into this,
yeah.
they're kind of waiting. It's a story I had for 20 years, and I would get snippets, and it was kind of like the best way for me to describe it is in my head, I saw like grayscale, the story formatting,
Okay.
and there were no names, there were no nothing. And I, hands to God, this is the truth. I was cleaning my house, and the story started coming in color, and the names of the characters started coming in color. And I went into the shower, I turned it on, and it was just like an overload of the story just coming through me.
Sure.
And I got out of the shower, got dressed, got my computer, and started writing it, because everything started, it became like, this is it. This is the story.
Right.
And it just hasn't stopped. So for me, like when people say writer's block, no, I don't have that.
Right.
I actually have too much of the story running through me all the time.
Well, as a creative person, like I know, being active, like you said, you were cleaning and then all of a sudden it just
Mhm.
hit you. Like that kind of stuff happens to me too. Like I'll be riding my bike and all of a sudden I'll get like a melody, it'll just come and I don't know where it came from, but it turns into a song or like I'll be in the shower and an idea for a movie will hit me. Like it's odd how that kind of stuff happens. Um, and it just
Yeah.
comes, I mean, who knows where it comes from?
Yeah. Well,
It's
I might need you actually because
okay.
I with every book because it is about a rock band and it's based on my experiences in the New York club scene
Okay.
in the 70s, 80s. It was
Right.
very big.
Hmm.
Everybody
Popular
went to a
bands.
club on the weekends, and if you followed a certain band, like they played at a club on Wednesday nights or Thursday nights. So um, I came into it by dating this guy who was a roadie,
Okay.
and he was a roadie for the best band on the circuit. They were phenomenal. They played more progressive music like Jethro Tull
Hmm.
and Zeppelin and things like that. But they were phenomenal musicians, and I became very good friends with two of them. Where they met my daughters. I mean, that's how long the friendship went.
Sure.
And then that opened me up to meeting all these other bands. And I started dating a bass player from another band. And it was great because sometimes they would play at the same club at the same time.
Hmm. Okay.
I will tell you that one band that actually made it out of that club scene,
Yeah.
um, and I remember, on the big weekends, they always had two bands
Hmm.
and Twisted Sister
Oh, sure.
and my boyfriend's band at that time would always somehow end up being like Fourth of July, Memorial Day, and it was a scene. It was just, you know, but being with the band, like you have your own solitude, you have your table, and but there would be massive people,
Yeah.
and it was really fun. But you also, and it wasn't even the big time, and you saw the backstabbing,
Mm.
the where some guy wants to be your manager and he has money and he gets you studio time, which back then was really hard to get.
Right.
And um, and then they would change the band. They would fire somebody, and so then you change the complexion of the band that you wanted to record.
Right.
And I saw that happen a lot.
Right.
Now, in my books, I do write lyrics for songs
Cool.
because the main character, although she sings, she doesn't know how to write music.
Mm.
And as the band gels into what goes on for the six books, that's her thing, is that she writes the lyrics. So
Right.
I've written lyrics to songs and I'm shouting out to everybody, hey, I can't write music, but if you can,
Yeah.
I'll work with you.
Right on.
Um, so that's the fun part is, there have been times when I had the idea from a song, I got into bed and I said, oh, no, 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 and went right back and wrote the
Right.
song.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
So,
So, um, I was going to ask how important is music in general, but rock music in particular to your life? I mean, you obviously had the big thing going on with the clubs in the 70s and 80s, and now currently you're writing a book, and it's a romantic novel series, but there's also a music theme running through it. So obviously rock and roll is a big part of your life and your experiences. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, that'd be cool.
sure. I think always, even as a young child, my parents were teenagers when I was
Yeah.
born. So I remember the music of the early 60s, all the female, the Ronettes and all of that. And music was always in my life.
Yeah.
My father was a 50s doo-wop person. And when we would get into the car, he would put that on and we would all be like, oh, oh, Dad, please stop.
Oh man.
Um, and now, so many years later, I appreciate the fact that my father exposed me to that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I appreciate it. But growing up in that, and I think one of the biggest music blasts, okay,
Mhm.
for the Beatles, we don't even discuss them because they are who they are, and
Right.
they were they started everything.
Yeah.
Um, and always, I mean, Zeppelin, the Doors, and you grow up in that. And in New York, we had a radio station called WNEW,
Okay.
and they played, they would play like a whole side of an album, and
Nice.
could be Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It could be Pink Floyd. They were just a very progressive type of radio station. So
Nice.
I was exposed to that young, and I guess when I was 16, I was going to the clubs. Um, so music has always been, and people say you can pinpoint, you hear a song and you remember exactly where you were at that
Yeah.
time.
Sure.
And so music for me has always been big. It was something I should have done.
Right.
I
Right.
should, I pursued that more and didn't, because fear, right? And
Sure.
when you're younger, fear is like, how can I do this? I can't do it. And so you stifle yourself, and that's what I did. And I exposed my daughters at a young age to Van Halen, Led Zeppelin. I mean, you
Mhm.
name the music.
Yeah.
And I was putting the CDs in for them, and they knew, right? They were exposed to it at 4 or 5 years old, and
Right.
they would know when we go in the supermarket, oh, Mom, it's the police, or so I took my love, and I was always a rocker girl, right?
Yeah.
You can quell that for a little bit, but it jumps out, and it always was there. And I had moments, but now was the time where I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna, I work out every day, and I try to get my voice back into some sort of shape.
Right. Right.
Um, I sing at a much lower place, but I will say that singing, I don't like to sing the chick songs. So like,
Right.
when I was coming back from my doctor's appointment, I was on, and I was like, okay, like I can sing. Eddie Vedder and I have the same voice. I mean,
Okay.
I can sing Pearl Jam really well. Um, but I prefer singing the songs that guys sing. I don't want
Yeah.
to sing, a girly kind of. And I was never really into that music. Not saying that those female artists weren't great, they were, but it wasn't what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the chick that sang what the guys sang. Why
Right.
not?
Right. Sure. I know, like, growing up in the 80s, you talked about how you have like a lower register. Um, I pushed my voice really, really hard because that was everyone wanted to sing like Robert Plant. There was so
Oh,
many,
yeah,
there was so many hard rock bands in the 80s who had that vocals, those vocals. And now, I mean, I'm kind of gravelly now and like my ears don't work as well. So
right,
it kind of, but I can still sing my songs because I know how they're supposed to sound,
right.
It's a lot harder for me to mimic the way that I used to be able to. Because I was in cover bands a lot when I was younger. So it was singing other people's songs,
Yeah,
doing their
I mean
voices.
that's what you did. I
Yeah.
have to say that I have a playlist that I put on Spotify, and it is connected with the book.
Oh, cool.
The songs that are on that playlist, either are Gina's the main character in the books. Either
Sure.
she does covers
Okay.
and or it will relate to an event that's happening in the book itself. I will say I can sing Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin pretty good.
Awesome. Great
And
song.
yeah, and I forced myself to do that one. And I was like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I don't write music, but the songs that I wrote,
Mhm.
I know how I want them to sound.
Yeah.
Like they are a hard rock band, but they do have a couple of love songs because the two main characters are the love story, right?
Right. Right.
So
Sure.
um he writes a song for her, she writes a song for him, but and the rest of the band cringes like, oh no, they're gonna do another one.
Yeah.
um but I tried to like, I know, like, okay, this song I wrote and it's supposed to be a kick-ass song,
Yeah.
like really let's kick some ass.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a song that was dirty because you can do dirty now, you
Sure.
know you
Yeah.
can talk about things that people do and nobody cares
Yeah.
anymore.
I mean,
And
honestly, you kind of could back then too. Like Black and Blue by Van Halen, that's a pretty
yeah,
like,
but I do remember when the Who came out and
mm.
they when they did Who Are You, and
Oh, sure.
Daltrey says, who the
Yeah.
blank are
It was on
you?
the radio because he
Yeah,
said it so
yeah, and
fast.
it was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
that's so cool that they did that and they got
Yeah.
away with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so yeah, I just go back to even the Doors. Like I
Mm.
was listening to Roadhouse Blues this morning, and I'm
Such a
like,
good song.
I know, and
Yeah.
it's the younger generation are finding these things, right?
Right. Right.
And
Sure.
some of the bands from even like the 1990s, like you see Creed is coming back in
Yeah.
concert,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of other bands similar.
Right.
And the thing now, and I do go through with my books because it's over a 20-year period.
Hmm.
I go through the changes that the music scene has gone through, which
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, of course.
It was you were in a cover band, and the thing is you wanted that A&R guy from that record label to see you so that
Yeah.
you could do a demo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what everybody was hoping for. And then things changed.
Mhm.
And there was still the record companies pursuing, but then you had MTV.
Right.
And if you had a song that MTV liked and they played every hour,
Hmm.
you were going to make it.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe and let's face it, there are some songs that were on MTV that were like, well, I don't know why this is popular,
Right. Money,
but
payola,
but it
honestly. I
was.
mean, yeah.
And then you go into remember Napster and the whole
Hmm.
thing with you know um Metallica, they
Yeah.
got really upset about it. And
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
we started the streaming.
Right.
And so that changed everything. And every band has their own recording studio now,
Yep.
right? And they don't have to rely on
Right
the big
here.
label. Right.
You
You don't have to rely on
Yeah.
the big labels. You can do it yourself.
Yep.
And so I go through those changes in the music scene because it's real. And I'm going to write what's real and what I remember. And if I didn't, it wouldn't be authentic.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Of
So,
course.
yeah.
And honestly, like having the like almost the historical map in the book, I mean, that's going to interest people more than something you just make up, you know? I mean, it's
Yeah, I don't think you can make it up because there's too many people who know,
right,
right?
sure.
Too many.
Yeah.
I still have my musician friends.
Right.
Some of them are still grinding, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's a grind.
Yeah.
And some of them, like myself, got to a point where you said, well, I got to go to work.
Right.
And I went to school.
Right.
And so it was taking the and people would condemn you for this, for
Yeah.
taking the straight life, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I got a great job working in Manhattan, and by day, I worked in, of all things, an accounting firm. And let me just say that not all the guys are nerdy. That I had a group of friends we would go to the Irish bars and we would
Yeah.
have a good time.
Nice.
But it is a straight life. And at night, I still would, whether I wanted to be with this person or not. It'd be like, come to my gig, and I'd be like, okay.
Hmm.
And I had a couple of the rocker dudes come to my office, and everybody like looked over the cubicles and said, "Oh God, this has got to be Beth.
That's hilarious.
This is Beth for sure." And it was,
Yeah.
but you know, and then I married somebody who was super, super straight, my first
Okay.
marriage. Did not know about music.
Hmm.
And um, I really, to this day, don't understand. And I'm sorry to my daughters if they ever listen to this podcast. But it was, I had a situation that I needed to get away from because I had a stalker.
Okay.
And he took a job in Honolulu. And so I followed a couple of months after. And they held my job for a year, and I was going to go back,
Right.
and the stalker was still stalking me. So I kind of succumbed to something that I knew was wrong.
Mm.
And you make those choices in your life and you want to kick yourself and say, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
But the only thing, and people say, what, you lived in Hawaii? And it's like, well, you live there for as many years as I did, and you're far away. And I always wanted to come back to New York.
Right.
Um, I had my three daughters there. And I just got to a point where I said, I can't do this anymore. This
Yeah.
is because who I was really starting to come back.
Yeah, for sure.
And I said, I need to go back home. I need to go back to New York. And it was a battle, but I got my three daughters and we moved back to New York. And, you know, it was just like, boom, like I said, all my musician friends were like,
Right.
I gotta
Welcome
meet the
back.
girls, and
Yeah.
I even took them to outdoor gigs that some of my friends played.
Mm.
And all the guys were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe these."
Yeah.
It's just a very warming. It was a warming thing.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, you can take that straight road, right? Which sometimes we have to do because we have to earn money, right?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And but that creative side doesn't leave you. You
Right.
might divert yourself. Like I used to be a great party giver.
Mm.
And when I lived in Honolulu, I would have these parties and die to come to them. And so, like, I directed my creativity to being a great party giver, but
Right.
that wasn't who I was, right? So it finds its way, and then it finally comes back to you where you said, no, that you are supposed to do this.
Right.
And I do believe that probably by book four, somebody will want to make it a series,
Right. Sure.
a short, maybe a two-season series,
Okay.
because it's, I think it's pretty powerful. And
Right.
as the books go on, we start getting into the other members of the band and their backstory and how it all relates. And it's also it's also a very sexy story.
Sure.
So
Sure.
there's a lot, they call it spicy or smutty. So yes, it has that in there. It's
Right.
not it's a very R-rated series of books.
Okay.
A little nervous
Yeah.
when my daughters would read it because they're adults now.
Right.
And it's like, what is she what?
Yeah.
What is she writing? Why is
Right.
she So yeah, it is a little bit of that.
Well, my mom was when I was young was very into like Harlequin romances.
So was my mom.
Yeah,
Yes.
she loved those things. And
Yes.
Danielle Steele. So I mean,
Yeah.
um, and Danielle Steele. I mean, her books were pretty, especially for the time, they were pretty racy. But she made a bunch of movies, a bunch of TV movies, and a bunch of
Yes.
series. I mean, she was the most popular romance novelist that I can think of. Like, so I mean, it can be done, for sure. Like,
You know, and I said to my editor after, when she was editing the second book, and she said, I think you need to continue the story. And I
sure,
said, okay, fine. Um, and I said, and she said, this could be something that is streaming, Netflix or Apple
sure.
or whatever picks up. And I said, well, if that's the case, I said, then you and I are writing the screenplay because I've seen way too many books that
Mhm.
have been made into either a movie or a series and they change things around.
Yeah.
And sometimes they change it
They,
around because they need to have certain character types in their story.
right.
And when I wrote my story, it was organic. And it was her cousin is mixed race.
Mhm.
And that was always this story in my head like
Yeah.
20 years ago. I don't feel beholden to having this and having that. It's just the characters are who they are.
Yeah.
And yes, there's this, and yes, there's this. But it's because that's how I saw them always. And because I own everything
Right.
being self-published, I would not turn over my stuff for somebody to change it.
Yeah,
Why?
for
Why,
sure.
why would he do that?
So many times it seems like a studio is just buying the name, as
Yeah,
opposed to really wanting to create something true to the original source.
right.
Um, I can't think of the movie right now, but there was a movie about witches. I read the book and I loved it. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, is that? Maybe. I don't know, but I read the book and I loved it. It was basically about this wizard's apprentice who fell in love with a witch she had like an evil background, but she was trying to be good.
Yeah.
And I read the book and I loved it, and it was like hugely popular. And then the movie came out, and the movie was nothing like the book. Like it wasn't even the same story. It
Yeah.
was
I see.
completely different.
Yeah. And so at this point in my life, I'm not going to sell out, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I own everything. I want to be, I want to be in the mix of, oh, you want it, you want it. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. You can bring on your screenwriter,
Mhm.
but me and because my editor is also a writer,
Okay.
she does a lot of ghost writing.
Okay.
um I said we'll write the screenplay because there might be a little deviation in the explanation of a house or something
Sure, sure.
that can change. That doesn't change the story, but the characters are who they are,
Right.
and because they're tied to the band, you can't change them
Yeah.
because the personalities for the band are important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would not sell out. And even my publishing consultant said to me, a publishing house might want to come to you on the third or fourth book.
Sure.
And I said, why would I do that? If I'm that far into it,
Right.
I'm not gonna sell to them. I'm not gonna because they're not gonna they're not gonna give you millions of dollars,
Sure. Sure.
if you got 100 grand out of the deal. And so why would I sell things for 100 grand?
Right. Right.
Plus there's songs, and I'm willing to work with anybody on the music. So the songs would be something too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I look at it as these many avenues. And no, I'm not going to sell out to anybody. I
Sure.
will work, if somebody wants to come up with music, yeah, 50-50. I'm not, you're thinking of the music. I got the lyrics. Maybe I'm 40, you're 60 because you're thinking about music.
Right.
So those kinds of things, yeah, I'm willing to work with, but not changing my book. If somebody wanted to make it a series, I wouldn't do that.
Right. Have you I'd obviously wouldn't be on the level of like a Netflix or Apple TV or anything like that, but have you heard of indie rights? Um
No, I haven't.
okay, so indie rights is a digital publishing company, and you submit the film has to be completed, but you
Right,
submit your films to indie rights, and they'll submit it to Netflix, but the chances of it getting approved, but they submit it to like basically every digital platform out there. You don't have to do any more of the work. Um,
right.
and they are actually, if you watch independent films on streaming, a lot of them are
Sure.
sponsored by indie rights now. Like it starts at the very beginning. They're pretty huge at this point. I'm producing a movie that we're going to start filming in April, and we're going to go
Nice.
through indie rights. So it's a pretty good deal
It is a good deal. You feel that what they want out of it is,
to foster filmmakers. I mean, honestly, that's what it seems like. It doesn't seem like they're really getting much out of it other than helping people reach a bigger audience. So it's pretty cool.
well, it also helps them because then you say, "Hey, I
Indie
worked with
rights.
them,"
Right.
and if you get the big shot, right,
Mhm.
and then they get credit too, and they should.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole thing is that because I'm looking at all these different avenues of, because I want to. And this is the thing my family said, you want to be a celebrity. You want to be out there.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't want to be. So I'm very careful about, um, on all my social media, it's basically professional. So
Sure.
I had to hide all of my daughter's pictures and because they're like, we don't want to be out there.
Right,
And I
right,
was
right.
like, okay. Yeah, and I respect that because just because I want to be this,
Yeah.
they're like, we're happy to be your daughters and support you, but we don't need to be out there, mom, like you want to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's, and I said to them, I am going all the way in this, and you're either with me or you're not.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're with you, but we want to be behind the scenes.
Right,
We
sure.
don't want to be out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, I have wanted to be famous my whole entire life. Like I always felt like there was something like from the time I was about 4 years old. Like
Yes, thank you. I
yeah,
felt the same
yeah.
way.
I just felt like there was,
Yes,
I don't know, there was more. You know what I mean? It just,
yes,
yeah. So
I get it.
I have two uncles who are in pretty successful bands. My one of them is in a much more successful band. The other one is in like kind of a successful gigging band.
Hmm.
But my uncle Steve, who goes by Artie Lennon, is the lead guitarist for the Flash Cubes, who were a
Okay.
pretty big power pop band in the late 70s and early 80s regionally, like in upstate New York. But they
Okay.
but they went to Japan and played
Oh,
in
got
like
big.
stadiums. Yeah, like they're
Yeah.
gigantic in Japan. So
Isn't it funny how you can be that way in
so
a different
weird.
country?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like a rock star in Japan, and to see that happen as I was growing up, it really made me
Right.
feel like, it was something that I could. So I've always been a really open person. I've never felt like I needed to be super private about much of anything because I want everybody to know what's going on with my life.
Yeah.
As you
Well,
know,
I
so
get it.
it's a different mindset. You know what I mean? When you're born like that. I feel like I was born like this. Like I was just,
Yes,
yeah.
because I felt the same thing. I
Yeah.
remember as maybe I, and I also knew that my life was different because part of the book, she comes from, and because I grew up in this kind of background, I have to be careful of the words that I say.
Yeah.
Um, she comes from a very well connected family. Her
Gotcha.
father is very um, big, big, big,
Gotcha.
big.
Sure.
And so in the books, there is me sprinkled throughout
Right,
things that
right.
happened to me, things that were said to me. And when it comes to that aspect,
Yeah.
My father was a wise guy, and I
Gotcha.
knew from an early age that I was living in a different sort of family thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you just know not to talk about certain things,
Right. Right. Right.
and it's the way you grow up.
Yeah.
But I do remember being about 6 or 7 years old in my bedroom, looking at myself in the mirror, saying, "You're supposed to do something big."
Yeah.
And
Yeah. For
it
sure.
was, you're right. It was like you were born with it, and you knew there was something else. There was
Right.
something else.
Right.
And I finally got to that point now where I said, screw everything. I am doing this because I was supposed to do this 25 years ago
Sure. Yeah.
and didn't do it. And so now I'm going full throttle, and I'm like, either you're coming on the ride or you're not.
Yeah.
Uh, I like this song, and I thought about using this song in introducing my books, but I did not. The group Survivor,
Mm.
Pop Evil has a song Survivor,
Okay.
and I can relate to that song very well. And I
Yeah.
said, and when I listened to that song before I wrote anything, I said, if I ever write a book, I'm going to use that song.
Yeah.
But I thought about that a few years ago without, actually doing it. So, you're supposed to do something, and everybody says to me, you're a different writer
Right. Hey.
because most authors don't want to be out in the public eye.
Yeah. Fair. Stephen King doesn't do interviews, and he's like, which is just crazy. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I went. My mother-in-law used to live in Maine, and she was a big Stephen King fan. And you can drive right, his house is set back, and it's a big
Yeah.
Victorian house.
Yeah.
And he'll come out,
Oh
and
yeah. Huh.
if there's people there, he'll say hi,
Right.
and then he goes back into his house.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I saw his house, and then he owns the house next door too.
Ah, no
But
neighbors.
yeah, so yeah, never my genre of
Oh, sure.
I'm not a horror person, and I wouldn't say I'm not into sappy romances
Okay.
either,
Yeah. Yeah.
like my daughter watches the Hallmarks. I'm like, what are you do why are you watching that crap? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
Um, but I like edgy and push the envelope,
Right. I
push
th
it.
I think that so geez, I have so much stuff now rolling around in my head, but just talking about what we just talked about, I think that part of Stephen King's appeal has always been that he writes in kind of a plain language. Like
Yeah,
anybody can understand a Stephen King book.
sure.
Yeah, he's very it's there's a big appeal to that, but I did want to ask you, well, geez,
Yeah.
so much stuff. Okay, so I want to go back to something else that you
Just
said, and then I'll
go,
ask my
go.
question.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
okay.
Yeah, so I'm from upstate New York.
Okay.
But I do feel like on the East Coast, there is a sense of like things that you're not supposed to talk about. Like we grow up with kind of a mm, I don't want to like talk bad about people from LA or
There's
anywhere
an
else,
East
but
Coast, West
there's
Coast thing.
definitely a
It
mentality
definitely
that's
is.
different. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is.
Like the more that I travel to other places, the prouder I am to
Yeah,
be from back home, whether it's the food or the way that people interact or just I don't know, there's kind of a toughness there that there's not anywhere
absolutely.
else. And as much as like they want to promote, like super liberal thinking and whatnot in other places, I feel like like I grew up around black people, Puerto Ricans, Asians, Greeks.
Sure,
We
sure.
all loved each other. You know what I mean? Like it
It
was
wasn't a question. It
right,
wasn't, it
right.
wasn't, it was just, we probably grew up the same way where it's like, yeah, I get it, but I'm still your friend,
Yeah,
and I'm not, and that's not acceptable today to
right.
say, so what, you're black, you're my friend, or you're Asian, you're my friend. I don't look at your color or your ethnicity
Yeah,
because it doesn't matter to me.
right.
And I like the way I grew up where I accept people for whatever they are
Yeah,
and I don't label them.
right, right.
And it's
I feel like
but
back home though, everyone was still allowed to have their own culture. You know what I mean?
yeah,
We're like, yeah, and it's just different now. Like,
it is.
yeah.
And
So I love the East Coast. I don't know if I'll ever live there again, but I mean, I'm really proud that that's where I was raised, and it's
I am a proud my license plate says NYC lady.
nice.
And I have two big stickers, New York Giants and New York Jets, on the back windows of my car.
Yeah,
So I am, and of course, anytime I go into a supermarket or something, and my mother moved to where I am,
yeah.
and her New York accent, you don't lose it.
Right, right, right.
And I grew up in Westchester. So basically, I'm the county up from the Bronx, right? I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
born
yeah.
in the Bronx. So Westchester is sort of like saying, it's New York City, but we're a different county.
Right.
Um, at 15, I was taking the subway into Manhattan to go see a show.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're right. It's a mindset and it's a feeling, and you
Mhm.
cannot express it to people unless they grew up that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when I go back, because I have one daughter who lives in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, which I have to say, the minute you go over, I know it's called the RFK, but it's the Triborough to me.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
The minute you go over the Triborough into Brooklyn, weed, you smell weed. And
Yep.
my daughter lives in a walk up, and there's a dispensary, right
Hmm.
there.
Sure.
And I said, Kara, I can't believe Williamsburg just smells like weed. And she
Yeah,
goes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it does.
And I'm like, but when you walk out onto the New York City streets, it for me, the New Yorker in me comes
Yeah,
right back. There's
yeah.
no, I'm like, hey, hey, it's just the mindset, the feeling, because that's how you grew up.
Right, right.
It never leaves you. And I always say, maybe mom will the books take off. I'll get an apartment so I can at least be able to come to New York whenever
Right.
I want. And the interesting thing is, two of my daughters live in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And so Portland, if have you been there?
I've never been to Portland, no. I
Oh
have
my
friends who
God,
live out there, but I've never been there.
you have to go,
Yeah.
because it is weird, and it
Mm.
is very uh, liberals. They're very woke there,
Sure.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can overlook that
Hmm.
because the rest of it is like a circus.
Right.
And it's like watching people, and it's like, I can't believe what's going on here.
Right.
Dispensary every corner, and it's the people are just in that Pacific Northwest Portland head,
Yeah.
and I enjoy it because I feel like I'm watching a show. I'm
Right.
not necessarily part of it. Um, Although I did wear, when I was there, this red coat that had fur on it, and everybody stopped, and my daughter's like, "Why do you have to dress like so everybody notices you?" And
Yeah.
I said, "I'm in Portland. It's
Right.
everything's cool."
Right.
But you're right. There is, no matter what anybody says, like Biggie Tupac, right?
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is an East Coast West Coast vibe,
100%.
and no offense, because I have family and friends that are West Coast, but
Yeah,
I'd rather be the East Coast girl any
for
day.
sure. Yeah. I
Any
actually, you were talking about your license plate. I actually have East Coast tattooed on my neck. So, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you got to represent.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm out here in Indiana, I might as well. Uh,
Well, I'm in Alabama,
oh,
okay?
wow. Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
So,
so, and the funny thing, I do have to admit that when I was looking at colleges,
yeah.
there's the SUNY thing, right? Like I
Sure.
was accepted at Buffalo,
Okay.
okay,
Okay.
and I was going to go to Buffalo.
Right.
Um,
Buffalo's not a bad city. I lived there for a while. It's very
yeah,
industrial,
no,
but
I've
yeah.
visited several times, and yeah, it's fine. Although the
Yeah.
downtown area now is pretty empty. It's
Oh,
kind of
I haven't
scary.
been there in 30 years, so yeah,
Yeah.
but
But I was looking at other schools, and of course, I picked my schools were Alabama, Ohio State, Miami, Maryland, and USC.
okay.
And I picked them for a reason because they were all football schools, right?
Right, sure.
So Alabama was my number one. And of course, when I was in high school, yes, I was smart,
Yeah.
but I did not like when I took the SATs, I was very like, yeah,
Right.
not realizing that that was like a really important thing that I should have paid attention to,
Yeah.
but I was having fun.
Yeah.
So I was okay with having an 88 average instead of having a 98.
Sure.
But so Alabama did not accept me.
Oh,
And so I kind of laugh and it's like, well, I'm here now.
yeah.
And it's, people say, oh my God, how did you transform from New York to Alabama? And it's like,
Right. You,
Alabama's not a bad place.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
the South, and the South has its vibe.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And they're very gracious, very nice.
Right.
It's that Southern charm thing.
Right.
For me, the worst transition was going from New York to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah. Hawaii
That
is
is,
probably like so laid back. Like it's probably half asleep while you're there.
it's not only laid back, but the
Yeah.
people who live there
hmm
have lived there, forever and ever and
Right.
ever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. So you're like an
when you
outsider.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always felt like an outsider, even
Right.
though I had friends for, decade plus.
Right.
I still felt like I never belonged.
Right. One thing that I think is funny about places outside of New York, when I get to talking, people always think I'm upset. They're always like, "Oh, calm down," and I'm just like, "This is
I
just how
know.
I express myself. Like everything is fine." And people always think I'm like either stressed out or like really upset, and like I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
man, this is
I,
just
it it's the way we talk. Like
yeah,
I can't if I'm having a conversation, sometimes I'll be like, and
yeah."
it's like, wait, what are you yelling at? And it's
I'm
like,
not
no, I'm
yelling. I'm
not
just
yelling. I'm trying to
talking.
tell you the story.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
use my hands.
yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't help that I am half Italian, half
Right,
Jewish.
right,
And
right.
so I come from two ethnicities who
Yeah, and
love
that
to.
is a New York combination for
And
sure.
thank you. You
Like,
get
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It is it's such a New York combination
yeah,
that, other people kind of look at it like, really? I mean, I do admit my ex mother-in-law
yeah.
called me not a nice name, and I'm like,
Mm,
how do you? I'll say it.
yeah.
She called me a half-breed, and I was trying
Oh,
to figure out what does she
yeah.
think I am?
Right, right, right.
And so this is like the first time I'm meeting her too.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were red flags, right
Right.
from the beginning.
Yeah, and that's one.
And I said, what do you think I am? And she goes, well, you know, your father's an Italian Catholic and your mother is Jewish. And I said, and
Right.
I said, in New York, you can find
Yeah,
probably,
that's like, yeah,
it's such a typical
common.
combination.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess people don't get it,
I
but
guess.
I'm proud of both and I have fun with it.
Yeah.
I can be like the character in the book is she doesn't take anything. She will call you out, curse you out, and that's part of me. Like
Right. Yeah.
people always want to know. I did a podcast and the woman read my book
Okay.
and she said, and she was getting ready to read the second one, and she said, well, you say that Gina is really you. And I
hmm
said, yes, to a certain extent, because what happens in Gina's life definitely did not happen in mine.
Right.
Wish it did,
Right.
wish it did.
Yeah.
But I said, but there are certain events in the book that actually did happen to me. And
Right.
she pulled one out, and it was the main character getting to be a hard ass on somebody.
Okay.
And she said, was that you?
Right.
And I always said, I'm not going to say, but if people pull something out, and then I'm going to tell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, yes, I really did that. And she was like, oh my, she couldn't believe that I did that. And I
That's
said,
awesome.
well, yeah, no, I mean, that kind
Right.
of stuff happens.
Right. Right.
I did it.
So, I did want to ask you, this was a question that I kind of had in mind for almost the whole interview, and but so you have a MBA in business? Is
Not
that
an MBA, just a
oh,
BA.
just a
Yeah.
BA? Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
wish I went for a master's, but
Yeah.
for in business administration, yeah.
Okay. So how has that helped you with self-publishing? I thought that was
Um, well, I understand the business world.
sure.
I worked at a big eight accounting firm. That's how I started my career. And then when I lived in Hawaii, I worked for the biggest advertising agency.
Hmm.
And when I came back to New York, I got a job at IBM immediately. People are like, what, they hired you like in 2 days? And I said, yeah, they did.
That's awesome.
And people wait like 6 months to get it. But so I was very much in that big corporate world.
Right, right, right.
And I loved it and I was good at it, right?
Yeah,
And so in business wise,
yeah,
it's helped me to be like, okay, I'm not going to accept that,
right.
or let's do this. And especially now with marketing,
Yeah,
I do have my marketing person, and now that I put myself out on social media so heavily, um, I'm getting a lot of marketing people who say,
yeah,
well, we can expose you and guarantee you 25 to 35 sales.
yeah.
You pay us, $50. And it's like, if that was the case, my marketing person would be doing that
Right.
already.
Sure, sure,
So,
sure.
that comes in handy because like, okay, these people can't do what they say they're doing.
Right, right.
And that's where the business acumen comes in, where you're like, okay, no, that's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. Because I think,
Um, so yeah, I think it from the standpoint of sussing out the fakers.
sure.
Like I said, when I first got into it, there were two very disreputable people who came to me right away, and one guy was calling me every day and saying, the deal's going to go off the table. And I said, look, I am not ready to do anything with you. And
Yeah,
then I looked and I saw that the funny thing is my publishing consultant that I work with published a book with them and
okay.
lost about $15,000. And so she's like, Beth, red flag.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So you learn things as you go through them. So, when people try to hard sell you, and I'm sure you've been in this
oh, for sure. Yeah,
situation,
yeah,
if they're hard selling you, they're full of it.
yeah, yeah.
Because if they're that good, they don't need to sell themselves to you that hard.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's where your business head comes in, right? It's like,
Yeah. I think
no, no.
a lot of creative people have a hard time with the business side of things. So I thought that it was interesting that you actually had experience in the business world, and I was just wondering how that all balanced out.
Yeah, I mean, it translates.
For sure.
And here we go back to the East Coast thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So our heads are wired differently, right?
yeah, yeah,
So we know if somebody is scamming us, right?
yeah.
And it's sort of like, okay, um, and I call people out on that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, you might as well.
Um, and sometimes it's not nice,
Yeah,
and I don't really care.
right.
Um, but that's the benefit that we have.
Absolutely.
It, I just really think that that's important because other people don't have that.
Yeah.
And I've seen people get into situations and be taken, and it was like, you didn't see that coming,
Right,
you
right,
know?
right, right, right. I feel so
Uh,
bad for the people who like lose their life savings and
right.
man, it's like you couldn't tell, you know?
Yeah. But what I think is interesting is that you're kind of like me in a
Yeah,
lot of respects, right? You write music, I write lyrics.
yeah,
Would I love for this to be, and I do always feel like you did, that I was meant to be
yeah, yeah, yeah,
out there in the public eye. And I will go, this is how ballsy I am.
yeah.
So if somebody wants to pick up my series, right? And it does start where she's younger and then it moves up to somewhat present time. I,
Sure.
I don't put a time stamp on it. My proofreader, which is another thing, you need,
Yeah.
keeps my timeline for me.
Okay.
And when I would do the playlists, she would say, that song wasn't out. That song
Mm.
wasn't out at this time. And then I'm like, oh my God. And she's younger. So
Yeah.
one of the songs on the playlist was Yesterday by the Beatles.
Sure,
And
sure.
she said, that song wasn't out. And I said, Cheryl,
It
I
definitely was.
said, the song came out in 1966. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
I said, you need to, and she didn't understand, like somewhere in the book, I said, um, oh, I heard you have a great axe collection.
Mm.
And she could not get that reference and she wanted me to change it.
It's
And
a
I said,
guitar.
no, no. I
Yeah.
said, that's the way they spoke. I said,
Yeah,
this is what it means.
for sure.
And so sometimes you have to, you know, say, look,
Yeah, that
you
fits.
don't know. I
Yeah.
know better. And she let it go.
I remember just speaking on timelines and stuff like that. I remember when the kid on Stranger Things
Mm.
played Master of Puppets and people were like Master of Puppets wasn't out when this happened and then it turned out that like the producers of the show said that the album had been out for 2 weeks. And they're like, if he was an amazing guitar player, he could have learned to play it in 2 weeks. And so, like,
Yeah.
but people like jumped on that, just that, like he couldn't have learned Master of Puppets, like
Yeah,
crazy.
well, when she does covers,
Yeah,
I had to go and I'm Googling, right? And it's
right.
like, okay, if they're doing a concert tour, which
Mhm.
I go through the touring and I go through the lows
Yeah,
of what happens too.
yeah.
Addiction comes into play in the
Right.
book.
I read some of that.
Um, and I would look at a song, and if they were touring, say in May, and I said, I want them to do this song, and I looked, and it's like, oh, but it didn't come out till September. I
Mhm.
was like, well, I can't use that. And so
Right,
there is research you have to do because you don't want that to happen.
right.
You don't want somebody to come back to you and say, she's full of it because she doesn't know what she's talking about. That song didn't come out.
Yeah, that's crazy
And
that people pay that much attention, but they really do.
they do,
Yeah,
and so I needed to pay attention to that
yeah, for sure.
because, I did a whole bunch of podcasts a few months ago, and they would always say, "Oh, you're the rock star girl, you so easy, whatever." And so I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to use that." And I do TikTok reels every now and then. I used to
Oh,
do them a
nice.
lot. And so that's the way I label myself as the rock star girl. And I'm
Right on.
like, um, so I'm waiting for like Nickelback to say, well, wait, who's this rock
Sure.
star girl?
Yeah,
And I'm like, well, I'm willing to work with you guys too. I
right.
mean, come on, let's go.
Let's do it.
There's so many bands out there now that I would love to,
Yeah,
either
yeah.
if it's a song, I'd love to work with you, Keith. I mean,
Right on.
let's go.
Yeah,
Um, but you have, your thing.
yeah.
So what I was going to say, the ballsy part of me is when I write, like I feel Gina. I feel
Hmm.
her.
Sure.
And so it's kind of like this symbiotic relationship where she's me, I'm her, I get where she's going, I know her emotions. Obviously, I'm writing it, but I say her lines out loud
Oh,
while
wow.
I'm writing it because to me, it has to sound like something that I would say.
Right,
And,
right.
and so it's like, well, no, she wouldn't be that kind. She would put a few words in there.
Right.
Um, so there's that. And I always said, and my daughters are like, you're crazy. I said, if anybody wanted to do this,
Yeah.
I would want to play Gina because there's nobody who could play her the way I could play her.
Right, right, right.
And my daughters are like, oh my God, you're too old. And I said, they have a thing called AI now, and they
Right.
can AI your face. And it only has to be for, a couple of episodes, and then they
Then
could
you're
take my
you.
real
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing. I mean, think
Sure.
about that, Keith. If you want
Yeah.
to be in your thing, they can AI your face.
Right, right, right.
And so that's the beauty of technology to where we are, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to, do I want to own it all? Yeah, how
Yeah, of
ballsy is
course.
it of me to
Yeah.
say I'm going to play the part? And
Right.
I'll even sing. I will sing.
Right, right.
So,
And that,
yeah.
saves you from having to hire somebody to do a soundtrack when you can sing the songs yourself.
Yeah, but I think that there, like I said, there are certain songs, and I'll give you two instances of how diverse I'm going.
Sure.
Um, Paul McCartney's "Maybe I'm Amazed" plays a big role in the story,
Yeah. Okay.
and then Stevie Wonder, "You Are the Sunshine of My Life,"
Okay.
plays, and it's like, so I'm fitting songs that are appropriate for that part of the book,
Yeah, yeah.
and I forget where I was going with this. So they're important parts,
Yeah.
and it has to make sense.
Right.
So my songs are there's one really good song that I wrote in book two, and so yeah, I shout out to all those guys out there. It's like, I'll work with you. You can
Yeah.
have 50%. I don't care. I'm not being greedy. I just,
Yeah,
and maybe,
licensing is oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say licensing is a really interesting thing because the movie that I'm producing, the soundtrack is very, very important because the tone of the movie is very, very important. And so I have been reaching out mostly to independent artists, and some of them have just been like, yeah, use my song. I'm happy to have it. But then they have management and they have licensing that they've actually paid for, so you have to pay to get their licensing to like get a temporary license on it,
Yeah,
and it can get really tricky. Like sometimes it's super easy, but then and I had one guy who actually wrote a song for the movie, and he did it pretty cheap, all things considered. But it's licensing is a weird thing to navigate. And I can't even imagine what it would be like with a Paul McCartney song. Like if
yeah, I
so
know.
yeah,
And so, yeah, so I would want, and I think it could be one individual, it could be a band that legit does a soundtrack. There are certain songs that have to be in there,
right,
and then of course the songs that the quote unquote band writes.
right,
But I would give them license as long as it's period appropriate, right?
sure, sure,
So you don't want to throw a song out there that darn well wasn't out,
yeah,
or so I would love somebody to step up, whether it's an individual. I mean, look, Trent Reznor, how
mhm.
many soundtracks did he do?
Sure, yeah, absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
not that I want Trent Reznor is not my vibe, but
Right.
he's I'm he's good.
Yeah,
And
yeah. His soundtracks are pretty amazing. Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
feel them. Like there's definitely a sequence, which I guess makes sense with him, you know.
yeah. And I do know Nine Inch Nails came out with a new album
Really?
last
Huh.
year. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I wonder what it sounds like.
And that's what I'm talking about. Like these bands, like Nine Inch
Sure.
Nails,
Sure.
touring again. And I know this because I read this big article that these guys, and you know this,
Yeah.
that the money that you make off of the songs are, okay.
Now, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not,
yeah.
you're not going to make a million it.
Yeah.
The money they make is touring.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, God, look at what Taylor Swift did. I mean,
Man.
she's worth $2 billion.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Crazy.
And so that is the new thing. That's why all these older bands are coming out.
Right. The Depeche Mode is
Oh,
on tour. And I was looking at tickets because I love Depeche Mode. I mean, you know.
I got a funny story about Depeche Mode. Go
Okay,
ahead.
cool. But to get like not quite floor seats, like the section right behind floor seats was $700 for one ticket. It's
Yes.
just like, man, I would love to see Depeche Mode, but I can't pay $700 for one ticket. You know,
No,
it's just like,
no, no.
man,
I mean, the lousy seats
yeah,
are like 125.
sure, sure.
So I have a Depeche Mode story.
Okay.
When I was in one of the, I mean, I call it my band days, and that's
Yeah.
how my daughters refer to it. So I'm at a club, da da da, said boyfriend's playing,
Right, right.
and this guy comes up to me and he hands me this card.
Okay.
And I said, "What's this?" And he goes, "Hold on to it, because someday you'll know."
Okay.
And I was like, "Okay." And I looked at it and it said Depeche Mode. And I had it in my wallet for like 20 years.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, why do I still have this crap in my wallet?" And I
Yeah.
threw it out and I threw it out.
Oh,
And it was
man.
they handed it to me and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, why did I do that?
Right, right,
I
right.
should never have done that."
And if you had it for 20 years, it had to be close to when they were about to break. Like everybody wants to rule the world,
Yes,
and
yes, exactly. And
or
so
people are
it's like,
people was them. Everybody wants to rule the world was Tears for Fears. But
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, the ticket prices are ridiculous.
yeah,
And I am actually trying to get booth space for there's a couple of rock festivals that are
sure,
going on.
yeah,
And there's a big one in Maryland,
okay,
but I don't know. I mean, uh one night it's going to be I think like Seether and Breaking Benjamin
sure,
and Nickelback, and I mean it's a list of like everybody I want to see, right?
right, right, sure,
And I have a friend who has done book festivals with me,
okay,
and I'm kind of transitioning to the romance conventions because that's where you get all the crazy women who are like, "Oh my
right,
God," you know.
yeah,
So I have two of them, but they're not until the fall of next year.
okay,
I'm still trying to get into other ones, but so we wanted to do rock festivals last year,
hmm.
and um, there is the one in Ocean City, Maryland. I don't know if we'll get into, but there is one in Alabama,
Okay,
and it's 3 days, and it's Hank Williams Jr. I mean, and there's several other. I mean, he's
yeah,
from Alabama, so
sure,
that's why he's there.
right,
The next headliner is Kid Rock, and Kid
okay,
Rock lives down here.
right,
And so I'm not really a country person, but country is kind of taking a turn a
yeah,
little bit rockier, so I
yeah,
can
it's interesting, yeah,
I can handle that.
okay,
And then the next one is Nickelback headlining. And
okay,
my friend and I met. Um, on a Nickelback fan page, to be honest. That's how
Oh,
we
cool.
met. And
Okay.
then, so now we, hang out. And I said, we should get booth space for
Right, right,
all 3 days.
right.
And I said, but here's the thing. And this is how ballsy I am. I
Yeah.
said, tell them with the booth, we want backstage passes for all 3 nights.
Hey. Yeah.
It's, and that's the thing. Like, if you get in with anybody, backstage passes cost them nothing,
Right, sure. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's like, just give me a backstage pass.
Yeah.
I've been there before. I know the scene.
Right.
It doesn't cost you guys anything. You're making, the VIP tickets that they have are, like you said, $700. The
Right.
VIP, it's about $600.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe you get a meet and greet with the band.
Right.
And like, I don't want to meet. I've met plenty of bands. I've met plenty of rock stars.
Yeah.
I'm that fangirl. Like, I want to meet you, like you and I are talking.
Organically. Yeah. I talk to people about that all the time. I almost consider like meet and greets to not really be meeting the person, you know?
It's
I've,
just phony. It's like, okay,
yeah.
we got to take a picture with them.
Right.
And I describe that in my book,
Yeah.
how she hates the meet and greets because it's just putting on that face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you and I both know this,
Yep.
that when you tour and the band gets all pumped up and yeah, hey, St. Louis, love you guys. Oh my
Right.
God. As soon as they're off the stage, it's like, okay, that gig's done. All right,
Yeah.
where are we going next? Like, it's a job,
Right.
and it not saying that they don't love the fans can, get them hyped.
Yeah.
But when they walk off the stage, it's
You
like,
got to get
okay,
on to the next thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just how it
And
goes.
and people want to believe, oh my God, and that's the fan worship.
Right.
And,
Sure.
I like bands.
Yeah.
I'm fans of them, but I feel that I'm equal to them as an
Right.
author. And I'm not going to grovel. I'm not going to do
Right.
any of
Right.
that.
Right.
I want to pick your brain musically. I want to
Yeah.
pick your brain for something, but yeah, I'm not that adoring,
Right. Yeah. It was
you know.
funny. I actually I won uh well, first I won tickets to a G Love concert, and then we got to go to an acoustic show, like a private acoustic show with winning
Yeah.
it. So I got to go to this private acoustic show, and then they gave away a CD shopping spree, a $600 CD shopping spree
Hmm.
at the acoustic show, and I won that. And he went with me.
Wow.
So yeah, he was like helping me pick out stuff, and so it was pretty cool. And then he came back to town. This was like I want to say this happened in like 2008 or 9. So then he came to Indianapolis last year, and I paid for acoustic show. I paid for it this time because I wanted to
Mhm.
see another one. So like me and a buddy of mine went to like the private acoustic show that he did before the actual show, and afterwards he hung out and talked and stuff. And during the show we got to like communicate with him a little bit while he was playing, and he did not remember going on the shopping spree thing with me. He didn't even remember it happening.
Yeah.
Like to me, it was this really cool thing. Like I got to hang out with one of my favorite artists. We talked about like his family and my family. Like we had like a pretty good conversation.
You had a
And he
deep conversation.
didn't remember it. And I was like, dude, we were in a town car. You were reading Spin magazine. You were reading an article about Matthew Fox. He's like, yeah, man, I do so much stuff like that. I just don't remember. I'm like, right on. I mean, I
Yeah.
get it, but it's like so odd how like
Yeah,
they compartmentalize. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it was just
And
another day on the job to him. So it was weird.
exactly. And
Yeah.
you want, at least the way I look at things now, is
Yeah.
that I want you to look at me. I'm an artist, you're an artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and same thing for you. And if I have a deep conversation, I might call in my chips with you one day and say, "Hey, you're playing in my town. Uh,
Right. Right.
hi, I'd like some backstage passes, please."
Yeah, for sure.
And I've done that, and I've had some interesting exchanges with people in bands, being a female
I'm sure. Yeah.
backstage.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and I do go into that too in my book, the
Right.
groupie
You got
thing.
to,
And
it's part of the thing.
it is part of it, and I so am not
Right.
that thing.
Sure. Sure.
And
Sure.
it's all part of the deal. And like you said, you're an artist and people should respect you
Yeah.
for who you are, because you're their equal.
Yep. For sure.
And I've met, and I'm not going to name a big lead singer from a really big band that I loved him.
Yeah.
And I met him, and it was like, wow,
Yeah.
he's a real, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say jerk, but I'm saying jerk.
Gotcha.
And then it blows your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And the coolest thing is when you meet people when they're just regular people,
That's
but
what you want.
yeah, for sure.
And some of them say, "Oh, I'm just a regular guy."
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, "But are you? Like,
Yeah.
can I have a conversation and then I can determine
Right.
whether you're really that real guy?" Because I want to get to know the real you, because we see who you are on stage.
Right. Right.
And I accept that that's who you were on stage, but you there's got to be something deeper, right? You're
Yeah.
deeper, I'm deeper, and unless you're just I remember with the bands that I hung out with, well, that I was a part of, as far as, the girlfriend of the band, which
Right.
is
Sure.
in itself is a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, and those guys used to come off stage, and they would egg them on sometimes, and and when they would get off stage, they were like, they're just sheep, like
Right. Right.
the
Right.
fans will just,
Do whatever we want.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow,
Yeah. I I had some friends in a band, and they would always play an encore. Like they would plan the encore.
mhm,
Because they knew that everyone was going to be expecting them to do it. They had
right,
gotten to kind of a level where they had to do an encore. And then one day, Jason, the singer, he goes, I'm tired of this. He's like, we're not just going to go out and automatically give them two, three, four extra songs. He was like, if they chant for us to come out, then we'll come out, but we're not going to come out every night. And so that became the thing.
huh?
Like, they would only come out for an encore when the fans, the band was called
Yeah.
Brother Meat. So when the fans would be like, Brother Meat, then they'd come out. Or More Meat, they chant More Meat a lot. But yeah, so, and I feel like that was kind of a test to the fans to see how they, how much they wanted it. Like, it was just an interesting decision for them to make. Like,
Well, they do want it.
yeah,
You mentioned acoustic.
yeah,
I have to admit that I enjoy acoustic versions of
sure,
songs more
sure.
um, than the actual song.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is when Scott Weiland did the acoustic version of Plush.
Plush. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And and that is sad all in itself, because I
Right.
was a big STP fan,
Yeah.
and Velvet Revolver, and I saw him in Velvet Revolver, and it was called Claus Fest, and I saw Korn was there, and I've seen
Nice.
Korn, like, that was the first concert I took my daughters to,
Oh,
was
wow. Fun.
Korn and Puddle of Mud.
Oh, wow.
And people were looking at me like, what? And I said, well, my daughter's into corn, so
Yeah.
we got tickets,
Right.
and I took all of them.
Right.
And but I love acoustic versions of songs.
Sure.
I listened to Nirvana when they did
Oh, the
Unplugged
unplugged. Yeah, sure.
on MTV, and it's
Yeah.
like, damn,
I have a French import of that actually keeps in all the chatter in between the songs and like the crowd reaction and stuff. It's
yeah,
really cool to listen to. Like it's actually the whole
yeah.
thing. Whereas like on the MTV Unplugged from New York, they cut out everything in between the songs.
Yeah.
So the French import is like I said, it's the whole thing. So it's pretty cool.
And now, I know iHeartRadio does it because, and I keep going back to these guys who I loved who have beautiful voices and
Yeah.
like Chris Cornell, he did,
Oh man. Yeah.
uh, and, and his voice to me is like, was one
I
of a kind.
I think Chris Cornell's the greatest rock singer of all time, to be completely honest.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
just,
I love Robert Plant, I love Bon Scott, but Chris Cornell's voice is just
yeah,
man.
yeah. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And what gets me is, and I have to say, um, I have an affinity for the grunge
Yeah, sure.
era.
Yeah, absolutely.
Loved it, still listen to music from that era.
Sure.
It's some of it's on my playlist.
Right.
And but you think of like Cobain and Cornell and I don't know, STP, not really grunge, but I'm gonna throw
They
that
were in
Scott
there,
Weiland
yeah.
drank himself to death and
Sure.
um Lane Stanley from Alice in Chains. I mean,
Heroin,
we
yeah.
could go on
Yeah.
that all those bands,
I mean,
like,
Mark Lanigan lived a decent amount of time, but he didn't actually make it to an old man either, and he was an alcoholic. I mean, the
that, and
whiskey,
that's
yeah,
what did Scott Weiland. And I
yeah,
saw when I saw Velvet Revolver at this big thing, they were the last ones to go on.
okay,
And I saw STP many times
sure,
when he was good.
yeah,
One time he came out of rehab and we waited for an hour and a half for them to go on stage. So that was something.
right,
But when I saw him in Velvet Revolver, he was slurring his words. He was having a hard time singing.
yeah,
And I remember saying, I gotta go.
yeah, yeah. It's
And
hard.
I said, I cannot watch this man
Yeah,
perform this way. I want to remember him
yep,
the way I remembered him and
yeah,
not this.
yeah, for sure.
And I left because
Yeah,
I couldn't,
yeah,
I mean, Slash, great. He's a great
of
guitarist, but
course, yeah,
Scott Weiland couldn't sing.
right, right,
So it's sad that that has happened to many of those guys. I
definitely.
actually, the friends I had from that big band in New York,
Yeah,
two of them, the my closest friends, have passed. And
yeah,
then I've had a couple of other friends from that era pass. And then yesterday, I have a friend who keeps track of all those New York club bands, and we
yeah,
found out that one of the guys I knew from another band, he died in September, and it's
yeah,
like, what's happening with my friends,
for sure. Yeah,
what's this going on? I don't
right,
understand it.
right.
Um, but it's part of life. You
Yeah,
get to a certain point, right?
yeah, it's wild. I actually interviewed John Easdale a few weeks ago, and he's Drummer is like my favorite band. John Easdale's my hero musically, probably. But he all the stuff that he's been through, like with the drug addiction, and he's had a lot of mental health issues and stuff. It's
For
so
sure.
crazy that he survived. He's 60 now, so I mean,
Thank God.
yeah, yeah. It's just talking to him, and oh, Dramarama wasn't the biggest band in the world, so you didn't hear about a lot of the stuff that was going on with John. And to talk to him and hear about all of it, like when he was producing he produced the Greta album in New York City, and while he was in New York, he picked up a crack addiction while he was supposed to be there producing
Yeah.
an album, and it's just like, man, you never knew this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm so glad he's still alive and he's got a family now and things seem to be going well for him. But it's just there's so many stories that went the other way. It just
Oh,
sucks. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So many. And I think though
yeah.
that part of the creative person
You look for
is
something to fuel it, and it's
I, I think they're susceptible, especially to depression,
sure.
because
Oh
how
yeah,
many of them?
absolutely, yeah,
And I would say that at one point in my life, I fell into a black hole and said, I'm not going to let this get me. And I threw away antidepressants and said, I'm not doing this. I'm just going to pull myself out.
Yeah,
And therapy is a wonderful thing. I mean,
for sure.
I had my therapy appointment before I did the podcast, and so it's just this wonderful release to somebody who is non-judgmental,
Yeah,
and I think everybody should go once a month or whatever it is. It's it just makes you feel better and it takes away those rough edges. I
yeah.
mean, because look, Chris Cornell was depressed taking I forget Prozac and
Right,
hung himself. I
right,
mean, and
right.
his wife knew that he was in trouble.
He was on the
And
phone with her that
and
night.
it's like,
Yeah,
he had a beautiful family, he had a
yeah,
beautiful life. He hung
yeah,
himself.
yeah.
It's just unfathomable, but creative people, I think, have that downside. It's
Yeah,
either depression and drugs,
right.
alcohol or whatever it is. It's a combination. And if somebody doesn't pull them out, or I think what happens to a lot of these guys, um, and shame on any woman who's in their life,
Yeah.
um, somebody has to tell them no.
Mhm. Yeah,
No, you're not going to do that. No, it's not okay. No, you need help.
right, right.
People are afraid to tell, pick a band,
Yeah, yeah, for
pick a
sure.
band, somebody drinks too much, or, they're doing, nobody, the women, the people around them don't say no.
Yeah,
And somebody has to step up and say, you know what? Your voice
yeah.
doing this. And do you want to get washed up? Because that's where you're going.
Well, I know.
And
Oh, you can go ahead.
no, no, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, I know that when you're in your 20s, um, going into your 30s, first of all, like your 20s is the first time you can legally drink. So you can like buy all the alcohol you want and have all your friends come over and get trashed. And then moving into your 30s, you feel like you're getting older and you don't want to. So you party even harder.
Right.
I mean, I went through that. Like I am an alcoholic, I'm in recovery. Um, and
Good for
I,
you.
well, thanks. And then the thing is like you hang out with people who are younger than you because people who are younger than you are nuts. And so there is a whole lot of like bad reinforcement
Mm-hmm.
during that time period.
Yeah.
And you can have a lot of fun, but the thing is, the fun will eventually catch up with you if you don't notice it, because
Yeah.
eventually it becomes something else, you know?
I look, I think I smoked my first joint at 14.
Sure.
There was a friend who uh my girlfriend and I were like, okay, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And he put this huge amount of weed and he said, we're going to smoke this until you get high because the first time
First
you're
time it's
not gonna.
harder. Yeah. Yeah.
So we did.
Yeah.
And then I remember we used to do, and I don't know if they have it anymore, but they used to have THC in pill form.
Oh,
And I
sure.
remember being super wasted on that,
Yeah.
and mescaline and Quaaludes.
Man. Yeah.
And when I think I was a senior in high school, and there was this guy, and he was selling blotter acid.
Okay.
And I was like, I was buying it from him every day. And I was going to my classes
Wow.
and I felt that it was so mind expanding. And I
Yeah.
would sit in the classrooms and be like, oh, wait, and I
Yeah.
was just like really into it. And he got to a point where he said to me, I'm not going to sell it to you anymore
Right.
because
You're gonna go
you're doing
insane.
it
Yeah.
you way too much. And I
Yeah.
said, no, but I said, I'm cool. Like I'm not having bad trips. I'm not
Right.
freaking
Right.
out.
Right.
I said, and he said, no, you got to chill a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, went to mushrooms, and
Right,
that I
right.
did mushrooms in Bob Guccione's penthouse. And
Really? That's
yeah,
wild.
a friend of mine, his father was Guccione's right-hand man.
Okay.
So he would let him use it, and we would do mushrooms in there, and it was
That's
like,
wild.
oh my God.
That's wild.
Um, and yeah, Coke was always around.
Sure.
Always, 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 always around.
Sure.
And yeah, did it, but I never understood how people, and I had friends who did, really have
Copious
a
amounts, yeah.
problem with it.
Yeah.
It was just for me like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it. It's here."
Right.
But I never felt that it was something that I had to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I was way more into taking pills. I barely did coke like a few times,
Yeah.
like here and there. My I don't know. I mean, it's years ago, so whatever. The statute of limitations is probably expired. But my brother used to run coke from Chicago to New York. And so he would come home with it and cut it with Tylenol. Um, because
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean,
And
and he would
you're,
give me some every once in a while, but it was never really all that big of a deal. Like,
yeah,
but I used to take Vicodin and codeine, like not Vicodin, Tylenol and codeine, the blue pills, the Tylenol
yeah.
and codeine pills. Yeah, I used
I
to drink a bunch of wine and then take those. Like, yeah,
I remember doing. I mean, the Quaaludes was
yeah,
anytime I see the Wolf of Wall Street,
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, I remember those Quaaludes because
yeah.
that I mean, I remember just being like really messed up.
Sure, sure. And
Um, and then
okay,
there were the Secanols and Tuanols. I was
yeah,
more of I wanted to be laid back.
yeah, yeah,
I
for
did.
sure.
That's why when people were snorting speed and stuff, I didn't like it.
Right, right, right.
I didn't like that feeling,
The
that
yeah, the
jittery
jittery
feeling.
thing, yeah.
And I just wanted to be mellow. I wanted
Right.
to be mellow. And admittedly, even though I live in Alabama, when I
Yeah.
go to New York and my daughters sometimes will send it to me, although they freak out. Um, I would like the gummies, right?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And so, and I do have a vape pen, but I
Right.
have to hide it, because of the person who I live with in this house.
Right.
Um, but the gummies, so I remember going to a dispensary in Portland and these guys, and I said, look, I like a mellow head. I don't want anything. I said, I don't want to be paranoid. I don't want to be
Right.
this. I said, I just want to be chill.
Yeah.
And they're on it. They're like, okay, so this is not for you. That
Right.
you should try this. And they had these M&M things,
Okay.
and man, like just mellow. And
Nice. Nice.
you
Yeah.
eat two or three of those, and you're like mellow.
Yeah. It was
And I did not go back to get more when I was in Portland a couple of months ago, but yeah, I find that whole thing fascinating. How
yeah.
like we just smoke like I'm sure you remember skunk weed and stuff. It
Right.
was
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's
It's a
weed
different
for
deal, dude.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
It
remember like you used to like okay, so I used to buy an eighth and break it down into dimes and then
sure.
sell the shake for $5.
Right.
You couldn't sell anybody a bag of shake now. You know what I mean?
No, no,
Nobody would,
no.
yeah, nobody would want
No.
anything.
I mean,
You're
look,
like, what are these sticks? You know?
yeah,
But
every guy friend I ever had
yeah,
from high school on,
yeah,
um, always sold weed. I mean,
sure.
I remember um being from New York, you would, but there was the Greenberg police,
Okay.
and they used to, I don't think they had any limits as to where they were in Westchester, but they were known to be killer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so here we are, my guy friends with the long hair, and they get pulled over, and sitting in the back seat, and he's like, "Okay, you gotta be chill. I got like 2 pounds of weed in the trunk,"
Nice.
and it's like, "Oh God!" And I was just like, "Oh, what do I say to my father when
Right,
you
right.
know?" And back then they couldn't, they weren't allowed to search. They
Right,
weren't allowed
right,
to search your car.
right.
So we got off on it's late where you get to
Yeah,
where you got to go,
right.
and they probably knew there was weed. They probably we smoked a joint like before we pulled
Right, they
over.
could probably smell it.
Yeah, but now it's a different time. And when you're saying coke being cut with Tylenol, I would not do anything like that
Yeah.
because of this fentanyl stuff.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. People are cutting it with like, yeah, stuff that'll kill you now, you know?
Again, how do you
And
trust that?
even, yeah, and even like, like I remember when I used to take LSD, people would be like, if you shake a lot while you're on it, it means that people cut it with strychnine. Like they put too much strychnine in it. And it's just like, that's rat poisoning. You know what I mean? It's just like, damn.
Look,
But we put it in our bodies, like whatever.
listen, I still smoke cigarettes. I'm one of these
Yeah,
people who still smoke.
yeah,
And I see the little every time, like I just bought cigarettes today,
sure.
and it says,
Surgeon
nicotine
General, yeah.
has, and it's got strychnine in it. And I'm like,
That's wild.
you know what? I stopped smoking for 6 years while I had three children. And literally, my friend, she's a doctor now, but she was a surgical nurse, and she
Oh wow.
was my last daughter's godmother. She came to my room with foie gras, champagne, and a pack of cigarettes, and she said, "Come on, let's go," because you could smoke outside then.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And I was wheeling my IV with me, and
Oh
I'm
man.
like, yes. And it was like the next day, I was right back to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's how
And
it goes.
yeah, and people said, and I was afraid of this. Um, they wanted to do the lung scan that they do now. Um,
Okay.
so my primary care, and she's like, "Did you do this test? This? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay." And I did it, and the person who was doing the test said, "So you're a smoker?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I've been smoking
Mm,
for a really long time."
right.
And he goes, "Because I
Don't see it.
can't, can't tell." And I was like,
Nice.
"Oh
Nice.
man, yeah."
Nice.
So yeah, I mean,
That's awesome.
so many good stories. The good old days, but with the
Yeah.
good old days is, the reality of the duality of fame and celebrity,
Yeah.
and and I've thought about it, and I'm sure you thought about it. Is we want that, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do want that. We want to be out there.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have to play with how much of yourself do you give people,
Right.
and how much you want to keep private,
Right. For
because
sure.
I don't think I understand that if you're out in the spotlight, you put yourself there and you're okay with it, but that doesn't mean you need to know every facet of my life.
Right. Right.
And so
Yeah.
where is that line?
Yep.
And that's the hard thing to navigate too, and
For
I'm
sure.
sure you thought about that.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I have a son who's 10, and then I also have like grown children. But it's hard because Casey is a super talented, my son, he's a very talented kid. And he plays basketball, he sings, he's like an artist. He's pretty amazing. So I think that he is gonna follow a similar path to what I followed, but he is in the right in the wrong situations, I guess, not necessarily the wrong situations, but he can be very, very, very antisocial.
Hmm.
So, he's like very, very outgoing with his friends and with people who he's comfortable with. But if he's not comfortable, he just like completely shuts down.
Yeah.
Like won't even talk. So that's something that I think him and I are gonna have to
Well, you
figure
recognize it.
out, you know?
Yeah, you recognize it, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah,
Having three daughters, uh, you know, I had them like one, two, three, one, two, three,
yeah.
and no, it was no big deal. Like all these women would say, "Oh my God." No, it was a very easy thing for me, right?
Right.
And I was in Hawaii, so I had no help.
Oh
I mean,
man.
my mother came out when they were born, but after that, it was all me.
Yeah.
Um, and so they were raised all the same. And then as they got older, they all took on a different personality, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
And my oldest, I never thought, and she's into art,
Yeah.
and she does a blog
Oh,
in,
cool.
but she works at some internet company or some kind
Oh,
of computer company.
cool.
And she just had, well, not just, but I don't admit that I'm a Gigi.
Yeah.
And so she's one now, and she sees me in the phone. I've gone out there 3 times to see her,
Yeah.
and I was like panicking, like, oh my God, of all them,
Mm.
she's not the one to have a baby.
Oh man.
And I was freaking out, like, oh, this poor kid.
Right.
She is the happiest baby in the world. And
Nice.
my daughter is actually an excellent mother. And I
Awesome.
said, oh my God, I rubbed off on her because that it wasn't a big, and she's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And my middle daughter is a little bit more, she's not introverted,
Okay.
but she's very cautious. She's very
Yeah. Yeah.
cautious.
Yeah. That's kind of how
Um,
Case is too.
Yeah, and I mean, she's got a great group of friends, and
Right.
and she's kind of the nerdy thing. She's into like these fantasy books. She's a gamer, so she's into all of that.
Right.
Um, but she's the one who's always questioning me, like, Mom, I stay with her when I go to Portland. She's like, Mom, what are you doing? Like, okay.
Yeah.
And then my youngest went to school at Marist College, which is
Okay.
a very good school,
Yeah.
and she was going for communications. And I said, oh my God, she lives
Yeah.
in New York. This is great.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks into her going to Marist, she told me she joined the rugby club, which I was like,
Okay.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
And we went to every rugby game. They had rugby tournaments. We were in Newport.
Nice.
And I noticed that half the rugby team, the girls
Yeah.
were gay.
Right. Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, question, and I would put it out to
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was like, no, Mom, I made out with a football player the other night. And I'm like,
Okay. Right on.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, she decided that after graduation, she was going to Italy
Okay.
to learn how to be a butcher. And she's a butcher.
All right.
And she's very good. And she's this tiny little thing. And she carries a side of beef on her. And she did come out to me. And
Mm.
I said, I gave you so many
Right. 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 You
opportunities.
could have, you know.
And I'm okay with it. And she has a wonderful person who
Awesome.
she's with, and I stay with them when I go to New York, and I love them dearly. And it's just it's amazing you raise them all the same, and then their
Right.
personalities disperse.
Yeah, for sure.
But when we're all together, we I can't tell you what we call ourselves,
Okay.
but we do, like, we'll spur the moment say, let's go here and do this. Like we
Okay.
used to do the diners, dives, and there would be
Oh,
restaurants.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we would go, there would be like this Jewish deli in Edison, New Jersey, which was like an hour and a half drive. And it's
Right.
like, let's go there. And then it would be, we went to Philly to go to Terminal 5. And it was just
Nice.
like, we would do these crazy ass things. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And, I miss that. Not having them around. Like at Christmas time, it was kind of like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're used to having your kids around, and they're still your kids no matter how old they are, and they're adult women,
Right.
but I enjoy their company. And I said to them, with the whole publishing company,
Yeah.
I said, I'm doing this because I want to leave you something. I want to give you a legacy.
Right, right.
I want this to take off so that I can give to you what you need.
Yeah.
If you need something, I want to do that. And some people think I'm crazy, but I want to do for my children.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, this is like they're like, why are you going so crazy? And I said, because I'm trying to do something for me,
Yeah.
but I also want to leave you something. I mean, I think that's important. And I think it keeps your head straight too,
Yeah.
knowing that there are how many ever, like for me, there's three people, well now four with the little one that you know, I want to give them something. I
Right.
want them to have something. And I'm sure you feel the same way. It's
Yeah,
like
for sure. Definitely.
it's you know, they're the next thing, you
Yeah.
know.
100%.
That's your legacy as them. And
Yeah.
so yeah, not to get corny, but
Nah, hey.
and they understand music, so
Right.
yeah.
Awesome.
And it's funny how they diverted because I raised them all on good rock and roll.
Sure. Sure.
And my youngest is into electronica. I mean, because she goes to the clubs and that's what they
Right.
play. And I'm
Right.
like, I can't
Yeah.
listen to it. Um, and my middle daughter will listen to the same music as me. I remember when she was listening to Adele before Adele became something.
Right. Right. Right.
I walked into her room and I said, "What are you listening to? Some like period music? You having your,
Sure.
I said, because it's all like
Especially that
sad.
first album. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
Chasing
I said
Pavements.
it's all
Yeah.
sad stuff.
Yeah.
And then she caught me listening to it and she's like, uh-huh.
Nice.
And my oldest daughter, I don't know how she got into this because she was the one who was with me all the way in grunge. And when Cobain died, she was like, Courtney Love did it, you
Right.
know,
Right. There's that
conspiracy.
thing. Yeah. I have a lot of
Um,
friends who are on that train. So,
yeah, well, the documentary that his daughter did
yeah.
is
Pretty
a
convincing.
question.
Yeah.
And that's something I wanted to talk to you about. So anyway, she listens to heavy rap, and I'm like,
Interesting.
how did you get into that?
Right. Right. Right.
Like I don't get that, and I refuse to listen to it. And I said, no, put something else on in the car.
Yeah.
I don't want
Huh.
to listen to that.
Well,
Um, being that you do,
yeah.
movies and stuff.
Sure.
And I had a conversation with this gentleman who was in Hamburg, Germany, and he was also a musician, and we talked a lot about the biopics that are
Okay.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I found I saw my daughter, and this is one thing that I do with my daughters. We went to Alamo Steakhouse, which is, you get the food and everything.
Right.
And I saw Amy Winehouse's documentary, or not
Mm.
hers, but it was her in it.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, we left crying
Yeah, of
because,
course. Yeah.
it was
Sad.
we were into Amy Winehouse,
Yeah.
and I refused to go see the Freddie Mercury one because they did not touch on the things that I remember seeing Queen on their first tour, and I
Right.
saw them with Mata Hoople,
Okay.
and we were doing THC.
Okay.
But I said to my girlfriend, who still is my friend from high
Yeah.
school, and I said, I know we came to see Martha Hoople, but that first band was really great.
Right.
And it was
Right. Right.
Queen,
Yeah.
and they were phenomenal.
Of course. Yeah.
But if you knew about the band, you knew about Freddie Mercury's background, and
Yeah.
the biopic whitewashes it. And, so I didn't go see the Amy Winehouse biopic
Right.
because they whitewashed it.
Right.
Um, and then I think back to the one about Jim Morrison, who did Val Kilmer.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
that one was okay,
Right.
but if you're going to do a biopic, be real.
Yeah. 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 For
Be
sure.
real.
Yeah.
And I rather watch the documentaries
Right.
about
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I'll watch a couple biopics here and there. If uh,
the
if
mood strikes
yeah,
you.
sure. I mean, like I don't know. I watch The Dirt, just because I'm into like that. I don't necessarily like Motley Crue that much, but I like that
Yeah.
era. You know what I mean? So I watched
Yeah.
that, um, and it left a bad taste in my mouth, to be completely honest. Like, just I don't know. It was
Well, certain stuff gets exposed,
right.
right?
Well, then the thing was though, like, okay, so Tommy Lee, and
Oh,
then Tommy Lee
I
is
I
an
know.
abusive dude. You know what I mean? Like he hit his
Yes, I
wives.
get it.
He pulled a gun on his freaking plumbers. You know what I mean? He's not a
I
great
know.
guy.
And he
And
smacked Pam Anderson when
right,
holding his infant son. I
right.
mean,
And they
he does that.
made it seem like
Mhm.
they just glossed over it. You know what I mean? Like it was just
Yeah.
part of who he was. Yeah, every once in a while he's
Nothing to
violent.
see here.
Yeah, that really bothered me like a lot. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I respect Nikki Sixx as a songwriter and a producer, but Tommy Lee, man, I don't know. That guy, it's something else.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah,
And I was not a Motley Crue fan,
yeah.
and I was not a Guns N' Roses fan.
Hmm.
But I do like Slash.
Yeah, sure. Slash is a great
So,
guitar player. Yeah.
um, but yeah, there are certain bands from like then. I wasn't a Bon Jovi fan.
Neither am I.
Um,
Yeah. Their music
I
is so
mean,
plain to me for some reason. I just
yeah,
never
I
really
mean,
got into
okay,
it.
so you hear Wanted Dead or Alive. Okay, fine,
Yeah. Right, right,
whatever.
right.
Um, I'm not a Bruce Springsteen fan. I
Oh.
actually did a podcast with a guy
Oh.
who who's it was called Springsteen something.
Yeah.
And when we were communicating, I said, I have to tell you, I'm not a Bruce Springsteen fan.
Oof.
And 'cause I had a friend who was into him before he got famous,
Yeah.
and I was into very progressive music. I was listening to Genesis with Gabriel,
Sure. Yeah.
Nectar, Jethro Tull, the Kinks. I mean,
Hmm.
the Kinks were kind of that way.
Yeah.
And he comes out with, the first album that he did, and
Right.
we were all like,
Is
uh,
that Rosita? Is that on that album?
yeah, the E Street
Yeah,
Band.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So we were like,
Great song.
yeah, okay, okay, you're into it, we get
Right.
it, but
Yeah. Oh man.
and so he was cool that with the fact that I wasn't a Springsteen fan, but
Yeah.
he made me, and I had to listen to a song. I
Okay.
forget the name of the song, and he said, "Tell me, does she go with him or not?" I can't remember the song.
Okay.
And I listened to it, and then because I couldn't understand anything Springsteen was singing.
Oh
So
man.
I had to look at the lyrics
Right.
and I gave him my answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't Springsteen. You know, uh, the big hair, like Poison, it's
Didn't like
like,
Poison either, to be honest.
and, Rat and this. It's like, I don't know
I
these
did like
guys,
Rat. Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
I know they existed.
Right.
I wasn't into them.
Right.
I think Metallica is not in that.
Oh, sure. Like Thrash was a completely different
Yeah,
situation.
they're not.
Anthrax and Metallica and those guys, yeah, they were
Yeah,
doing something
Metallica
else.
is not into that. I
Yeah.
mean, they're separate.
Right.
But there was a group of bands at that time period, and it was just like, okay, I'm just not a big fan. I'll keep
Yeah.
listening to the music that I listened to before.
Right. Right. Sure.
Um, but I did see the documentary on Nickelback, Love to Hate,
Hmm.
which
I
was
haven't checked that one out yet, but I do want to see it.
you should. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is, I am a member, in full disclosure, of their actual fan club.
Nice.
And they were releasing the movie in movie theaters that were
Sure.
in, you know, like shit places. It's like who's going to see the movie?
Right, right,
So
right.
I sent them a message
Yeah.
and I said, guys, why don't you stream it off of your own website
Right, right, right.
and charge people $10 to watch it?
Right.
3 weeks later,
They
they
did
did
it.
that.
Nice, nice. It's funny
And
because oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the first Nickelback song I ever heard was Leader of Men, and I thought it was
Yes.
Metallica.
Because I think that
Thought, yeah.
Chad really is into Metallica.
Yeah, right on. You could tell on that
Um,
song, like they're like it had a very nothing
yes.
else matters kind of vibe to it.
Yes, you're
Yeah,
100% right.
yeah.
And he's totally into Pantera. I mean, I know a lot about the
It's
band,
yeah.
so
I mean, you could hear it on their earlier stuff like Breathe.
yes,
Breathe is totally like a groove metal song. You know that dun,
yes,
dun, dun, it's totally like yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Hangnail, I
yeah,
mean, all of that. Yes.
yeah.
And Nickelback fans don't know that album.
Right,
I
right.
mean,
Sure.
that they're like,
They don't know the
okay,
state, they don't know the curb. Yeah, they don't know
right.
those albums.
And how many people listen to Feed the Machine? I
Right,
don't know.
right.
I mean, I know their whole work,
Yeah,
so
sure.
for me, it's something different.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'd love to work with Chad. He works with a lot of people,
Right,
so
sure.
come on, I'll
Yeah,
work
why
with
not?
you.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so yeah, it's just there was a, I think there was the music got lost for a while
Right.
because it didn't have an identity, and not that it needs an identity, but it was just kind of like I was in the forest saying, I don't know if I don't like this stuff,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna stick to the classics.
Right, sure, yeah. So we just went over the 2 hour mark.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah,
Well,
we have been
I
talking
loved it.
forever. Yeah, I mean it was really cool getting to know you.
I will do it again if you want.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. But
Because I can talk music all day long.
yeah,
The only thing I'll say is my books, it is romance. It has a lot of sex, but it is about the music world.
yeah,
So,
for sure.
and I can speak to it and it's how it affects everybody in the band, in their families, and because it does, it trickles down.
Yeah. Before we go, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you where people can find you, where people can find your books. Um and we will put up the Spotify playlist link. If you send it to me, I'll put it up when we post the episode. So yeah, just go
Okay.
ahead
Yeah.
and whatever.
It's out there in the universe, but it's Perfection Saga playlist, real simple. But I'm on Amazon, um, and it's Kindle or paperback. I do have my website, which is perfectionsaga.com, and you can buy the book there. And I do put podcasts that I did. The woman who does my book covers does my website. So anytime something's released, I send it to Victoria and she puts it up. And there's little excerpts. I'm on all social media, so if you type in my name, I will pop up.
Awesome.
So yeah, and you have to do all of it. So I'm on every platform, and Pinterest and LinkedIn. Yes, but don't find me
I saw your
there.
LinkedIn. Yeah, I was like, okay.
Yeah, don't find me there
Yeah, they're kind of
because
dry.
the good stuff is on Threads and X and Instagram and Facebook, which my daughters say, you guys took it over. We don't use Facebook
Right.
anymore.
Yeah, Facebook is kind of our thing now. But so yeah, I mean, at the very least, when the next set of books comes out, I would love to have you back. This has been a lot of fun. So
I love talking to people who know music.
yeah,
You and I get each other because I think we're the same person that was
definitely.
growing up
Yeah,
with the
definitely.
same ideas.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to thank Beth for coming on. I want to thank Tyler Martin for producing the show, as always, Emmy Studios. He is growing a podcasting empire at this point. So
Yay,
check out,
Tyler.
yeah, check out Emmy Studios on Facebook. I think he's got 5 or 6 podcasts that he's producing at this point. So
Wow,
we're
good
all a
for
family.
you.
Yeah, so check that out.
And you need to let me know what happens with your movie gig.
Oh, for
I'd be
sure.
interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And music.
Yeah,
Just that.
100%. Sure. Yeah, we will definitely keep in touch.
Okay.
All right,
Great,
cool.
Keith.
All right.
I had a blast.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.